developmental molecular biologist and research consultant. He's also professor of bioengineering at the University of Washington School of Medicine and the director of the Brain Center for Applied Learning Research in Seattle. He wrote this book to talk about 12 things we know about how the brain works and how these 12 things can be applied to our daily lives, both at work and at school. So over the course of the next few months, we're going to be talking about all 12 of these things on here. So starting from the right, the 12 brain roles include exercise, survival, wiring, attention, short-term memory, long-term memory, sleep, stress, sensory integration, vision, gender, and exploration. So today, to start off, Lucas and I are going to be talking to you about the first brain role, which is exercise. So to start off, does anyone know who this is?
Jack LaLanne.
Jack LaLanne. And does anyone know anything about Jack LaLanne?
He looks strong.
He does look strong.
He looks out.
He doesn't eat dessert.
He was originally a 90-pound weakling. Got sand kicked in his face a lot.
Yeah, so Jack LaLanne is known as the godfather of the American fitness movement. He starred in a lot of exercise TV programs. He invented all kinds of exercise machines and exercise devices, and is actually credited with inventing the jumping jack.
Wow.
Get it? So Jack lived into his mid-90s. He just died in 2011. It's been said that his biggest strength wasn't the size of his muscles, but actually the strength of his mind. They said that even though he was 90, he was mentally alert beyond his years and had the mind and capabilities of someone much younger than his age. So this brings up the question: is there a relationship between exercise and mental alertness?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes! You guys are good at this. So, there's another picture of Jack, and as Jack is the godfather of the American fitness movement, and this session is all about fitness, and Jack has recently passed away. In memory of Jack, every time we see a picture of Jack, we're going to do 3 jumping jacks together.
Let's get it
So,
started.
everybody up. Everybody up. Jason, everybody up.
We need to be instructed on the basics. We're going to do jumping jack. Some say clap your hands, some say don't. I have no strong preference, but let's get some movement going, all right? 1, 2, 3.
All right.
All right.
Good
Keep
work.
an eye out for Jack.
I have more in me.
The warped.
So, now that everybody's all hot and sweaty, survival to the fittest. So, our ancestors have developed a long way, starting from this little guy and evolving up to this wonderful looking man on the far side. Yes. Our ancestors were forced to wander around a lot. They had to search for food, they had to scavenge, they had to find that food. And it's been estimated that our ancestors walked somewhere up to 12 miles every single day. I don't know if any of us could say, sometimes I don't even think I walk a mile in a day. So walking 12 miles a day, that's kind of an extraordinary feat. Basically, the thought behind this is that the human brain evolved into the most sophisticated mind out there because of this constant motion. So the brain evolved not when people were sitting around watching TV, playing video games, but our ancestors were up, moving, constantly tackling new obstacles, trying to make their way from Africa to all these other countries, and new obstacles, new predators, new sources of food. And that's how we've evolved into where we are today. So, some questions that have sprung from this theory. Is it possible that physical activity still influences our cognitive skills?
Yes.
Are the cognitive abilities of someone in good physical condition different from those of someone in poor physical condition?
Maybe.
And what if someone in poor physical condition were whipped into shape?
They'd be happier.
They would be happy. Maybe they might be happy. I don't know. They might hate you too. So these are some questions that have kind of sparked from all these thoughts. So the author of this book was speaking about how he's watching TV one night and saw two different documentaries on TV. The first was about a man named Jim, and Jim was on the documentary about nursing homes in America. Jim's a man in his 80s who lives in a nursing home. He sits in a wheelchair lining the dimly lit hallways of the nursing home. He has a sad look on his face. He was lonely, doesn't have a lot of friends, and just really spent the last many years of his life staring off into space. He changed the channel and saw another program that was a documentary about Frank Lloyd Wright's life. Frank Lloyd Wright actually completed the designs for the last museum he designed when he was 90 years old. So he had clarity of mind, he had vision, and he was still kicking when he was 90. So attempts have been kind of made to explain the differences between people that age like Jim and people that age like Frank. So this has evolved into 6 different questions that were answered in this chapter. The first of these questions, is there one factor that predicts how well you will age? So it's been determined that one of the greatest predictors of a successful aging was the presence or absence of a sedentary lifestyle. It's been postulated that someone who's a couch potato, lays around, just watches TV all day long, and isn't really physically active is more likely to age like Jim in the nursing home, whereas someone with the active lifestyle is more likely to age like someone like Frank. I don't know, maybe we'll all be designing museums when we're in our 90s, you never know. The reasons why, we're all in healthcare, I'm sure we know. The list goes on. Exercise improves your cardiovascular fitness, reduces the risk for heart attack and stroke, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We could go on about the benefits from exercise. Oh, there's Jack again.
All right, for Dr. Sauer's benefit, when we see pictures of Jack and Lane pop up, we're doing 3 jumping jacks.
He's a
And here we go. All right.
And then you have to pose like that. All right, question number 2. Are people who age successfully more mentally alert? So, imagine this, but a lifetime of exercise and movement can result in an elevation in someone's cognitive performance. So this list here on the bottom, they did studies looking at exercisers versus looking at couch potatoes and seeing how they did on a variety of tasks. It was found that the exercisers outperformed the couch potatoes when looking at long-term memory, reasoning, attention, problem solving, reasoning quickly, thinking abstractly, and improvising on previously learned material to solve a new problem. So those are all different things that the people who were exercising and were moving did better than those who were quote-unquote couch potatoes. However, they didn't see any difference in short-term memory and also in certain types of reaction times. So while exercise benefits some different functionality, it's not totally all-inclusive. Another difference that they found was that there was quite a degree of benefit. Exercise helped some people to excel tremendously in these areas, whereas other people there was just a mild difference. Question number 3 was, can you turn Jim into Frank? 2 different studies that went down here, one looking at adults, and they looked at the couch potatoes. They measured their brain power. They made these couch potatoes exercise, and then they measured their brain power again. I'm not really sure how you measure someone's brain power, but they did it. Basically what they found was that the mental abilities did improve after the couch potatoes had exercised. They said that there were positive results obtained in what they call, quote, as little as 4 months of activity. Trying to think about some of my patients and trying to get someone to exercise like once, let alone for 4 months of exercise. Something to think about, but there was improvement. They also looked at children in a school setting, and they took the children, and some of these children had to go on a jog, 20 minutes at school 2 to 3 days a week. And then there was groups of children that didn't have to go on this jog. So they looked at the students that went on this jog 2-3 times a week and found a significant improvement in their cognitive function after 3 months. What's interesting is that when they stopped this program and they didn't jog anymore, all of the cognitive abilities, the scores returned back to baseline where they were. So the exercise helped them to improve their performances, and when the exercise was withdrawn, they returned back to their baseline. Question 4, what's the bad news? Well, the all you do is walk several times a week, your brain will still benefit. They also showed couch potatoes who fidget had increased benefits in their mental abilities versus couch potatoes who don't fidget. So, I don't know if you guys are fidgeters. I tend to like kick my foot a lot when I'm sitting. I don't know, maybe it's making me smarter. The gold standard that they came up with was aerobic exercise, 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week would help someone's cognition. An addition of a strengthening regimen on top of that would enhance that cognitive benefit. So I think we tell a lot of our patients anyways, 30 minutes of exercise, try for 3 times a week is kind of a good goal. But if you can tie it in now, so you'll also be smarter if you do that, pretty cool. Question 5, can exercise treat brain disorders? This was interesting to me. It was looking at the lifetime risks of different diseases and how much exercise helped to decrease those risks. So it's found that the risk of dementia decreased by half in patients who exercise, the risk of Alzheimer's decreased by 60%, and the risk of stroke decreased by 57%. Again, as I'm sure we're aware, exercise also regulates a lot of the different neurotransmitters and hormones, so it's also been found to help in some psychiatric conditions as well, specifically depression and anxiety. Found that the longer someone exercised, the more benefits were found on these disease states. Longer is in years over time, not in minutes per session. And this was also especially helpful in helping depression and anxiety in really severe cases and in older people. Found a lot of benefits in those 2 diseases by adding some sort of exercise. The last question, are the cognitive blessings of exercise only for the elderly? The problem is really that few studies have been done on this topic, and especially studies looking at children. The biggest study that has been done was looking at adults ages 35 to 55. And as before, they found that low levels of physical activity were bad for someone's cognition, and especially the problem-solving skills were hurt by a sedentary lifestyle. Not a lot of studies done in adults older than the age of 55, and even fewer studies done in children as well. Oh, it's Jack.
All right, so what I want to talk about next is building the infrastructure necessary to support your mind, right? So this is the human brain. What is the weight as a percentage? How much of your body weight is your brain?
3%?
2?
3?
2%.
Depends on how much you weigh.
Fair enough.
The appropriately sized person.
So we'll say about 2%. Now, for faculty only, not people who were at the session the other day with Dr. Wilson, what percentage of your body's energy is utilized by the brain?
Like 60%.
I was wishing it would be probably 40.
Not quite as impressive as those guesses, 20%. But 10 times as much as you would suspect based on its weight. But it's an energy-intensive organ. Now, the molecule of energy is glucose, and when you metabolize a lot of glucose, you create these pesky free radicals, and what you really need is blood supply, right? Because you need to bring oxygen in, and you need to be able to turn it into carbon dioxide and remove it from the body. So the importance here is just thinking about delivering blood to the brain and exercise, hopefully attributing to that. So I've already given you a clue as to one of them, but there are 3 essential things that your body needs to survive. So what is the pizza stand for, you guys?
Carbohydrates?
So yeah, sustenance generally, right? Stand in for all of the things that we need from our diet. Now, how long can you live without food?
7 days? Oh, it's in the water.
Depends on your baseline.
But if you're making it work.
All good things. So let's say a general rule of a healthy individual whose normal weight can probably survive about 30 days without any sustenance. Now, What about water?
A
How
week.
long can you survive without water?
A week?
Less than
3 days. So maybe as long as 7 days. And what's the final ingredient?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. All right. So, how long can your brain survive without oxygen?
Do you mean like before you pass out or before you like?
Let's say before there's sustained damage to the brain.
2 minutes.
5 minutes.
So 2 to 4 minutes. So if you're thinking about, which is the most important, I think we could land here at least immediately, right? Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about building roads, right? So there's a guy named McAdam. McAdam was an engineer in England in the early 1800s, and he noticed that they weren't able to move goods over dirty roads full of potholes, and people couldn't get the things that they needed. There was a lack of trade. There were a lot of people in remote areas who weren't able to get at the resources that they wanted. So he thought, okay, well, I'll just fill in these holes. And he used a mixture of rock and gravel, and all of a sudden, all these little accessory towns started to pop up. There were new side roads, and people who previously didn't have those resources were connected to things that they'd never seen before, and there was a flourishing economy. So essentially, you can see how side roads and better access to resources is a positive for the community. Now, how do you guys think that's going to tie into exercise? Anybody guess at what my next slide is going to look like?
Increasing blood flow to the brain.
Yeah, so I've got a little drop of blood, and it relates because you increase blood supply to the brain, you increase access to oxygen and to nutrients that you bring in through your food. So what is, well, I'll stop quizzing you for a second. Exercise stimulates nitric oxide production, and that's going to cause you to have some vasodilation and the building of accessory blood vessels that are going to get perfuse new tissues, right? So you may, in patients who have a lack of perfusion, you see end organ damage, you'll see a lack of blood flow to the extremities, and we can counteract that, and we can maybe get a positive effect also in the brain simply with exercise. So we come back to the brain, and it specifically may be involved in learning and in your ability to apply yourself to new projects by increasing blood volume in the dentate gyrus. And that's a little portion of the hippocampus. Now, what is the hippocampus responsible for?
Learning and memory.
Yeah, so memory is a huge part of its job. And when you increase blood flow there, blood volume there, we think that potentially you're also increasing your ability to store memories and then also to act on that knowledge that you've created. Also, you get sort of a fertilizer. So your brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which encourages new connections and new neurons. That's seen with exercise, and you're going to deliver it to those tissues with increased blood flow. So, oh, all right. You guys ready? All right, Dr. Hogan, we got 3.
She came prepared today.
All right. So we and the author would propose that it's time for a comeback. We need to change. Sarah mentioned that our ancestors used to walk 12 plus miles per day, and I can tell you from wearing this thing around all the time, the most I ever walk is when I go to the grocery store, and I'm not walking 12 miles there, right? So even relatively healthy individuals are probably not achieving a milestone even close to that. So let's not be this guy, all right? Let's change things. Let's improve the health of each other and our students, and think about what we can do to affect that on a daily basis. So technological advances are a big problem here. We're not going to reverse that. We're actually probably going to continue to utilize technology. It's going to keep making our lives easier. So we need to think proactively about how to manage that problem. Now, as we all know, this is what our ancestors looked like, right? With all that exercise. Maybe not quite so hairless. Pretty similar. Now, looks are obviously not the only thing we're going for, but it can be a marker of how we're doing generally with our physical health. So, integration is going to be key. It's becoming harder and harder to carve out extra time in the day to exercise. So making it a little piece of something that we already do, taking time out of our work or time with our family to make that more productive would be positive. Now we're probably not going to be striking poses like this or doing jumping jacks in most of our meetings, but perhaps there are other ways that we can achieve the same goal. Now they've done some studies in children regarding this same topic. As we all know, there's been a big push to kind of teach kids to test now. There's been a de-emphasis on physical education, and a lot of times you can't get the teachers who have the background necessary to provide really good physical education. Now, there was a study not described in much detail by the author, but got the general gist that they showed that taking away time in class, taking away time of didactic coursework, and devoting it instead to physical health, ultimately improved test scores. So you may see with a moderate amount of physical activity, actually better improvement on tests, or better scores on tests, rather than thinking that maybe you lost all that study time. Something to consider when, as educating residents or fellows, how you help them to manage their time. And another study looked at whether or not physical fitness itself was the important factor. And they found that if you just gave people supplemental oxygen, you would see similar improvements in cognition. So perhaps it's about oxygen delivery more so than your general physical fitness. So both sound to be important. Now, what kind of implications could that have? Perhaps MDM would be more effective if we were all on treadmills or ellipticals. Everybody's standing around and getting some physical activity, being challenged while they're also trying to challenge their minds. The Boeing, which is a big airline company, they used to have their executives work late nights and rarely have time with their families, or most importantly in this case, have time to exercise. And now what they've done is they've put an exercise facility on site, and they've restricted the number of hours that their executives work so that they are encouraged to place a larger emphasis on physical health. Now, I'm going to cover just the basics of what we've already said, which is that our brains were built for walking. To improve our thinking skills, we need to move, we need to improve oxygen delivery. And exercise is going to help us get that blood to the brain. We're going to lay down those roads, build the infrastructure necessary to support brain health. And notably, aerobic exercise, just twice a week will have the risk of dementia. I saw another study that came out this week that said any running at all will make you live longer. So I've been trying to at least get out, once a week for a half-mile jog. That's about my max. Now, what I'd like to do is bring it back to you guys. How are you going to apply this? Not, sort of abstractly, maybe I'll have people move around more during presentations. But what I really want to do is have you split up into twos. So start with pairs over here. Make sure you're working Dr. Schaefer and McGuire there in the back. And we'll give you all about 5 minutes. And I want you to think of one very specific way that you can and hopefully will change the way that you educate to incorporate the principles that we've taught you today. And we'll talk again in a couple minutes about those, all right? I would say...
Yeah.